Hello everyone, this will be part 2, chapter 22, of Regular Boy Daniel Wayne, written by Diamond Rosie and read by Insect Overlord. Danny was dragged back into reality by Tim's hesitant voice. "So," he started, "how is hockey going?" Danny blocked the sun behind Tim with his hand as he looked up, surprised by the question. Tim hadn't really brought up sports before, mostly sticking to video games and various projects for filling conversation. "It's good," Danny answered, not sure why Tim had asked. Tim paused before, "Do you, he tried unsurely, have any games?" Danny blinked at him before a small smile formed, realizing Tim had just been curious about his team. "Not quite. Qualifiers start this Friday." At Tim's lost expression and scrunched brows, Danny elaborated. "Qualifiers mean you compete against all the other Gotham teams. After that, the team that wins plays for Gotham, against all the other cities, so for a state champion." Tim nodded along. "Then, if we can get that far, it's the national championships." Taking the explanation, "What teams do you play for, then?" "Arctic Foxes," Danny said. "Friday's match is against the Gotham Bats." Deciding to be more open with Tim, "I play number 17. Alfred's black car came into view a few feet away as Danny continued. "Apparently the Bats usually win state, so it's a pretty intense qualifier." They slid into the car. "How's your team, then?" "They're pretty good. I got to be center forward, so we're practicing on, team integration and all that. Honestly, I was kind of surprised they put me in the second line. Figured I'd have to be a fourth or something for a while since I haven't played in a few years." Danny prattled on easily, fixing his bag by his feet before turning to face Tim. Danny laughed at the confused expression painted on Tim's face. "Forwards are like the offensive position. We strike and try to score and stuff. Defenders, pretty obvious, defend against the opponent. And then goaltender. There's 6 players on the ice at a time," he explained easily. "Oh, so you play offense?" Tim summarized after a moment. Danny nodded. The thought of inviting Tim to come to his game on Friday flittered through his mind. Nerves that Danny had long since disassociated with Tim danced in his chest at the prospect. Tim might be busy. He had school, and his cases as Red Robin to work on. Why would he want to come to a random qualifier on some of his only downtime to watch Danny? Despite his hesitancy, Danny decided to bite the bullet, trying to interject all the ease he could into his next words. "You can come to the game on Friday, if you want to see." Tim's answer came easier than Danny had been prepared to receive. "I'll be there." Despite the confidence Tim had assured Danny of his presence with, when Danny left the manor after school that Friday, he accepted the inevitable disappointment, knowing Tim was sure to be busy with something else and not be able to make it. The first game of the season was in a stadium in central Gotham. Levi had taken the time during their bus ride from their usual training rink to the stadium to catch him up on what they knew about the Bats hockey team. They were a relatively new team, only about 10 years old, but they'd been Gotham's final contestants, usually against the Robins. They were an incredibly well-funded team, and even though Levi didn't seem quite happy about admitting so, the Foxes hadn't given them too much of a fight in the years he'd been playing with them. Logan, Danny had learned, was essentially the unofficial co-captain and had done his best to boost morale on the ride over by going over strategies they'd been practicing for the past few weeks. Coach had given them the promise that dinner would be on him if they won this game. Inside the stadium, the large seating capacity looked despairingly empty, with a few people scattered around in the closest 2 rows. Danny pointedly didn't look at the sides of the bleachers, not ready to be faced with Tim's absence Danny was sure would be there. They geared up while the Bats were already on the ice, warming up. They didn't seem too curious about their opponents, many of them enamored in their own conversations. The Bats, Danny noticed, had more team members than the Foxes. Each of them already had their own jersey, black with yellow lettering and numbers on the back, and a play on Batman's original Bat logo pasted on their chest. The Foxes lacked in such funding, had been reserved to older jerseys, with numbers and the team name instead of their individual last names on the back. Coach had sent in Ash and Logan for defense in the start of the game, the third lineup of forwards despite their own hesitance. The forwards consisted of Ethan Hudson, a sophomore and the oldest of the three, and the only one that had any experience playing hockey. Parker Collin and Matt Matthews were freshmen in high school, and had only been able to play thanks to a program Bruce had enacted for financially struggling families with at-risk youth. They did well at practice and tried their best, but of all the forward lineups, they were the weakest. "Why are you putting us first?" Parker asked, holding his hockey stick with a vice grip after Coach told them to start the game. Noah frowned at the decision, but waited for Coach's explanation. Logan was the one that answered instead of Coach. "Starting a game isn't any different than joining in the middle," he said encouragingly, "and the experience will be good for you guys. You'll be setting the mood for how they perceive the rest of the team," Ash said in direct contradiction to Logan's placating work, earning him a look from the boy. Undeterred, Ash gave Parker and Matt an encouraging pat on the shoulder, pushing them toward the gates of the bleachers and toward the ice. "It'll be fine. Let's go." The referee gave the signal that the game was about to start, and the five headed on the ice, with Keith taking his spot silently in front of their goal. When they were out of earshot, Samuel was the one that spoke up first. "If they do horrible, we can use them thinking we're bad to our advantage," he concluded. Coach gave him an easy nod, not moving his eyes off the players on the field. Sitting in the bleachers, Danny tried to focus on the game and pick up on other teams' play strategies, but the small voice in his head stroked his curiosity, and he wondered, for just a sliver of a moment, if Tim had actually found a seat in the end of the bleachers. And that second was all it took for his earlier resolve of not checking to crumble. Danny felt like the world had slowed down as he peeled his eyes off the movements on the ice where the Foxes were essentially getting bodied, with Ash and Logan doing their best to defend the freshman and Ethan. It took only half a second for Danny to find the boy that had been on August's cover of Forbes at a young age of 16, and who Danny had only known through Twitter posts and YouTube videos before a month ago. The black-haired, blue-eyed boy was dressed in a casual hoodie. It was designer and easily cost more than a high-end computer, and slacks, a combination only Tim would think to make, and only his popularity and influence could pull off. Behind him, in a shadow, was one Stephanie Brown, as they both looked around the large stadium in search of something. Daringly, Danny waved at them, and fortunately Steph caught the action, waving back with twice the enthusiasm. She dragged Tim to the bleacher closest to where Danny sat. The unsuspecting middle-aged man that they sat a few seats down from did a stunned double-take at the model-esque teens next to him, eyes going wide. In the chilly stadium, Steph zipped up her oversized jacket over her crop top and tried to tuck her exposed legs into it. A tennis skirt probably wasn't the best choice of outfit for an ice rink. Greeting them with a cheek-aching smile, Danny turned back to watch the ice. Danny could feel the blood pump through his body with a newfound excitement to show off his skills to his new siblings. Steph was basically a Wayne, even if she hadn't officially been adopted, but that was mostly because it would make her and Tim being exes really weird. Parker, Matt, and Ethan couldn't really hold their own against the beast of the players number 56, 72, and 41 had turned out to be. Danny listened to Coach's explanation of how they were planning to switch the third lineup of forwards with the first once they reached the half point of the first half of the game. Noah and Theo nodded in understanding, and Liam didn't protest despite his visible hesitation. Samuel and Harper were eager to join the plays as well, and would replace Logan and Ash to recuperate before they would go in for the last half. Levi and Benjamin hadn't been assigned a playtime yet, and would need to wait until after halftime. Danny wasn't oblivious enough to not know that it definitely had to do with his late joining of the team. Holding his tongue, Danny waited for his turn to join the ice and prove that he wouldn't drag his team down. 56 and 72 were hulks of teenage boys, easily overpowering the smaller and less experienced Foxes lineup by sheer force. That coordination with the puck itself left much to be desired in terms of skill, especially since 41 was much more adept in intermediate maneuvers. The Bats' decisive players, 37 and 28, were easily able to stop any of the Fox's attempts at a point, and by the time Coach signaled at the ref for a play change, the scoreboard had somehow managed to remain a 0-0, thanks to Ash and Logan's backup and Keith's fast responses. The Bats players pulled off to the side with easy smiles and confident laughs, not bothering to switch out themselves. Theo took the time to give the younger players a nod of acknowledgement as his own lineup took on the ice. The nervous and dejected players took the empty bench spots as the whistle continued the game with the new setup on the ice. Danny glanced over at Matt, who had ended up sitting right next to him, hands wringing together, and nudged him with his elbow. Matt looked up at him confused and startled. "You did good," Danny said easily, giving the boy a small smile. Matt didn't respond and turned back to look straight ahead, hands sitting easily on his lap. The disparity of skill that had been glaringly obvious in the first collage of players had been eased after the sub out. Noah, Theo, and Liam were much more seamless than the third line, thanks to the experience that the latter still lacked. Liam's hesitance was still a hindrance and contrasted Noah's decisive and aggressive plays. Theo and Liam were much more skilled at driving the puck than Bats 56 and 72, whose heavy reliance on strength rather than ability only became more apparent. Noah's sharp drives helped them against the more skilled 41. The forwards were much more matched in skill, and the same could be said for the defense lineup. Neither of them let the puck come close to the goal. The time on the clock was dwindling, and it looked like Danny's earlier conclusion of the Fox's defense lineup being equally matched had been sorely miscalculated. The puck was coming dangerously close to the goal Keith stood guard at, 37 and 41 driving it against Samuel and Harper's cracking defense. 56 came up ready to take a shot that made Danny's stomach sink with anxiety. He took the clear shot, and Noah managed to slip in a deflect before it made it to Keith, but that hadn't been enough to deter them. The clock down only seconds. 72 stole the puck from Noah and took the shot into the goal. Danny held his breath as Keith drove at the circle of black and knotted it against the barrier just as the halftime horn blared. Danny went to meet Benjamin and Levi where they stood. It was his turn to try and turn the tides. The Bats returned to their bleachers. Normally a team wouldn't have the same players through the whole game, but as Danny watched the other team converse, it was clear none of the other lineups were willing to go on the ice, likely citing that the Foxes weren't a threat. Proven right when the same numbers slid back on the ice in their black and yellow jerseys, Danny made a silent mental goal to score their first point in the time he'd been allotted on the ice before the first lineup would be placed back. Samuel and Harper would be playing their defense, and Keith took his spot in front of the goal, his stoic curiosity contrasting the Bats' easygoing air. The beep sounded, and Danny could hear the distant cheer of his name as he flew across the ice, in the shadow of his teammates. The Bats snickered and jeered and tried to intimidate them, fake yawning dramatically as the clock began ticking. The referee placed the puck and moved out of the way, and they were going. Levi aimed for the puck, but 56 snatched it up, passing it to 41. Samuel had been nearest and went to snag the puck as Danny raced after it with the pack. Samuel caught it, but couldn't keep it for long, passing it to Levi. Levi drove the puck closer to midfield, trying to bring it closer to their goal. 72 was coming in to take a steal, his movements loudly projected, and Levi took the pass to Benjamin, who was nearest, but 36 drove in to intercept the pass. Cursing, Benjamin took off after him to reclaim the puck, with Danny and Levi following close behind. Samuel and Harper tried to block the players from being able to receive. The game leaned in no one's favor, and a few times Danny had gotten the puck, he'd immediately had to pass it off in favor of keeping in his team. Sometime between getting on the ice and that very moment, the loud sounds of an overhead air conditioning melted away along with the rest of the surroundings. It was just him and the puck, filled instead with the sound of blades scratching on the surface of the ice. The puck slammed against sticks and barriers, but never the net. There was a split-second standoff when Harper had passed the puck to Benjamin, 56 coming in hot, Harper on his tail and 72 chasing behind. Levi was blocking 28, but was covered by 36. Danny, being the smallest, had been overlooked, and they had taken to covering larger, taller, and bulkier players. Benjamin had a clear shot to Danny, and as soon as the puck landed against his stick, he started moving. 28 was the quickest to realize where the puck was headed, but was the furthest away. Danny glided across the ice. The Bats' goalie was unassuming, and if his posture was anything to go by, he wasn't paying attention. 28 was barely a hair behind him, and when Danny took a split-second glance, he caught an unidentifiable cloud of orange, too. 36 pawed at the puck. Danny evaded easily, curving around so that he was behind him as well. Danny looked at his goal, eyes zeroing in at the small opening the goalie had left. Any amount of logic would prove that taking the shot was a risk. The puck would have to slide past the long opening when any of the Bats could snatch it, if they managed to be fast enough, and the opening Danny had been eyeing was only millimeters larger than the size of the puck, not only making it incredibly easy for the goalie to block, but even an ounce of misdirection would likely give the Bats the perfect opening to have the puck in their court. The logic of the discussion flashed through his mind, but the puck was already on the blinding trajectory before Danny could think to reconsider. The world froze as the puck went for the opening. The back of the net was all that stopped its momentum. Danny had scored. There was a moment of deafening silence. The buzzer rang, and the scoreboard was updated from the old 0-0 to a 1-0 in their favor. Danny had scored. There was a rioting cheer from the Foxes' bench, and behind them Steph and Tim cheered just as jovially. The referee blew the whistle, meaning the other team had decided to switch out their players. 56 skated past Danny as they both retreated to their sides of the court, shouldering Danny harshly, knocking him to the floor. The referee started a warning whistle at the act. Samuel and Levi started the players down as they returned to their bench. Danny huffed, annoyed with himself, and was about to push himself back to his feet. Silently, Benjamin offered him a hand. Surprised, he stared at it for a moment, and then gave him a thankful smile as the boy helped him to his feet. Not exchanging any words, Danny was led to be showered with pats on the back in the benches, as the first lineup for forwards and defensemen took the ice. The game was won, with the Foxes' victory, 1-0. Noah liked to think he was a pretty sensible guy. He grew up in Crime Alley. He had to keep a level head if he wanted to keep his head. He knew Crime Alley before the Red Hood got around in it, and now he knows it after. Noah could tell the difference. It was a good difference, but no matter how much one guy tries, no matter how many guns he had strapped to him, he couldn't be everywhere all the time. Noah wouldn't blame his scuffle with some up-and-coming gang in the alley on Red Hood. He walked into that hell all on his own, and he'd own up to it. For the record, Noah was not running away. It was a tactical retreat so that he could get some backup. He could throw a punch, but it takes one hell of a guy to win a 1v, 20? He didn't exactly have the free time to stand and count, but there was a whole bunch of voices shouting at him and twice the amount of feet hitting the pavement. He'd call Theo. He'd get there before Noah started losing, and Noah trusted him to have his back. Noah pulled out his phone, familiar enough with the route to not have to keep looking, and dialed him. If he didn't pick up, Noah wasn't sure his phone had enough battery to call in it again. But Theo would answer. He'd come, Noah was certain. So when the phone made the sound it did when the other person answers, imagine Noah's surprise when it wasn't Theo who answered. Hello? The voice was familiar, only slightly distorted by the phone and Noah's running. F. It only took a glance for Noah to realize his mistake. He called effing Danny. What's up, man? The gang was on his tail. Noah didn't skip out on cardio, but crap, he couldn't keep going. Nothing. F. I meant to call Theo. There was no way Noah's phone was going to last for an explanation or a redial. I'm kind of in a situation. Noah tried to be quick, and told Danny his location. And the phone died. F. Dead end. No effing way the kid who lives all the way down in effing Bristol was coming to Crime Alley at ass o'clock. And even if he did try, he'd only ever get here in time to host Noah's funeral. Crap. With more confidence than he had, who wants to be first? He smirked, balling his fists. He should have brought a knife. What was he thinking, leaving it at home? Noah held up a fight. 2 of them were down, but his bruises were nothing to cough at. Breathing effing hurt. Holy crap, he was actually about to die. What the hell is that? Noah heard one of the gang kids say. He was further in the back, so it was hard to hear. What the... Ugh! Was the sound of the body hitting the floor. Only Noah caught the black hair, and thought that maybe Danny had somehow known to call Theo. But unless he'd shrunk half a foot since they'd last met, that wasn't Theo. Noah didn't have time to look a gift horse in its suspicious effing mouth. One of the guys came at him with a knife, and it only managed to nick his forearm as he knocked it out of the guy's hand. Noah easily beat him, despite his very sore ribs that were making it hard for him to twist left. But not even having time to gather his breath, Noah was back at throwing punches at the next guy that came at him. This guy had some pretty heavy punches, and after Noah managed to knock his eyes to the back of his skull, all he could do to keep himself upright was to lean on the brick wall behind him. Clutching his side, Noah looked at the battlefield in front of him. He'd managed to knock out at least 7 of the guys, and not Theo, who still had his back turned to Noah, was taking on the last 2 that were still on their feet, with plenty scattered on the floor around him. One of the gang dudes came at not Theo with a punch to the face, but he saw it coming and moved with the punch. Instead of moving to the side, the guy dropped to the floor. Noah wondered for a moment if he had actually taken the hit, but the fall was too clean, and the guy landed securely on his forearms and pulled off a wicked-ass maneuver with his feet that managed to pull both guys to the ground and put him back on his feet in a matter of seconds. And just like that, it was him and Noah. The guy turned around, and Noah, despite the pain, pushed himself off the wall to see what the guy's deal was. Crime Alley got into fistfights all the time, but not for other guys. Not for someone they didn't know, and definitely not against people that ran in crowds who could pull an easy 20-count chase on one guy. It took Noah a minute to recognize the kid, because, hell, he was the last guy he was expecting to show up. "Are you all right?" Danny asked, leaving the bat he'd taken up as a weapon on the floor. Because Danny had been the one to take down the majority of the group when Noah had only managed 7. What the hell? He didn't even look winded or hurt. "What the hell are you doing here?" Noah asked, more confused than accusatory, despite the edge he had tried to put in his words. What was Rich Boy Wayne's mystery boy doing in America's most dangerous city, most dangerous district, alone, in the middle of the effing night? "You called me?" Danny tilted his head to the side, like that was the most obvious conclusion. "You showed up because I called you? What the hell was this kid's deal? Why would he come all the way here just 'cause some asshole from his effing hockey team accidentally called him?" Danny was about to answer, but there was the sound of something hitting the pavement in the shadows. Noah's blood ran cold. He'd never heard that sound in real life before, but everyone in Gotham knew what followed that sound. A steel-toed bat. And there was only one steel-toed bat that showed up in Crime Alley. When Noah's head snapped to the sound in alarm, Danny turned around in curiosity. Heavy steps came closer to them, and Noah's balance began to falter from his injuries. Danny was quick to heave an arm around him and hold him upright. Red Hood came into the light of the street head, his faceless mask looking over the littered bodies on the floor. He pushed the one closest to him with his shoe, and when the kid groaned in pain but didn't wake up, he looked at the 2 that stood above. When the Hood didn't say anything, Danny, the effing genius he was, "Are you just gonna stand there or actually do something?" He rolled his eyes. "Yes, Danny, please provoke the guy that usurped all the underground networks in Gotham in a matter of days." "What are you doing here?" Red Hood finally asked Danny. "ACAB. Holy crap, is he suicidal?" Sure, Red Hood didn't hurt kids, but the classification of kid was still up for grabs. Noah was very aware that he, 6'1", broad-shouldered, aged 17, could easily fall out of that classification. Danny was shorter and smaller, but he still looked an easy 15, 16. Red Hood, to his credit, didn't immediately put a bullet through Danny's head. His shoulders shifted, and his head moved, and he still looked at Danny. "I look like a cop to you, kid? You want me to answer that?" A sound came out of Red Hood's helmet. It was distorted and sounded static. Danny was about to get them both killed. "Who's that?" Red Hood nodded at Noah, walking closer to them. The guns on his belt came fully into view. Danny looked at him. "That's Noah." "Good. No last name. He's on my hockey team." Red Hood seemed surprised by this. "You're on a hockey team?" Danny shrugged. "Yeah, we had our first game on Friday." Why were they talking about Friday's game with Red Hood in Crime Alley, surrounded by unconscious bodies? There's a pause, then a grumbled sound again distorted. "You win?" Danny smiled wickedly, and Noah huffed at the snotty answer he knew was coming. "Duh." Red Hood nodded in approval, then switched his attentions to Noah. "You hurt, kid?" "No." Noah tried to evade Red Hood's incoming hand, but the movement caused a hiss of pain. Red Hood, concerned, "That doesn't sound like you're not hurt." "I'm pretty sure it's a bruised rib." Danny was the one who answered. For how quiet he was around the team at first, Danny's a real chatter when it comes to Gotham's nefarious, apparently. Red Hood nodded and tried to get a good look at Noah. "You're Skinner's kid?" he asked. Noah nodded at the title most people called his dad. "You want a hospital, or I could ship you off home?" "I can get there on my own." "You can't even stand on your own," Danny snapped, and Noah kicked him in the shin. There was a small oof from Danny, but he stood firm despite the hit. And this concludes part 2 of chapter 22 of Regular Boy Daniel Wayne. I hope you enjoyed this. I personally, when I first read this chapter, I can remember skimming or skipping most of the hockey part because I don't know anything about hockey and I don't like sports. But the part with Red Hood, that was really good. We're coming up really close to the last thing I read in this story before I started podficking it. So pretty soon we're going to be to where I don't even know what's going on, just like you guys don't. So I hope you guys are excited for that. As for this chapter, there's probably going to be 2 more parts. Maybe I can fit it into one. It depends on how quickly I can read. Because according to my Kindle, there is still 1 hour and 43 minutes left in this singular chapter. I don't think I've ever read a chapter this long. I mean, kudos to the author, really, for taking the time to write such an incredibly long chapter. But yeah. Anyways, until next time, thank you all so much for listening.